I mean, we're getting really technical on this, but as
Yeah.
we, if again, it goes back to what we talked about in that very first beginning. Think about the camera, think about the visual movie that we're created. So
Yeah.
we've got leaves shot out around him. Okay, I can see that as he fell through the gap in the canopy. Okay, I can see that. And he fell through the gap in the canopy as they fluttered out. First of all, what is they?
Mm.
Because is is they the gap in the canopy? Is they him and whatever? Does it point back to the leaves? That vague pronoun kind of gets there, but we've already kind of given us that. We've already described the leaves, and so now we're going back to the leaves at the end of this sentence, and it doesn't help the imagery. So yeah, if we just leaves fluttered out around him as he fell through the gap in the canopy, now I can see that just in one fluid motion. The camera's panning with it. If I really want to get what happens to leaves after that, I'm gonna do that as a next sentence, because then that'll break it out and I will have seen the leaves, even if I do shot out, leaves shot out around him as he fell through the canopy. Boom. If I want to then continue the visual of the leaves, not having it as a tagged on clause at the end of this one and bringing it into its own sentence and allowing me to experience that visual moment, I think would be a better way to handle that. Releasing your inner dragon. All right. Welcome to another exciting episode of Releasing Your Inner Dragon. Today, we're going to do another crit. Another brave soul has offered
Popular
themselves up.
acclaim.
Yes. And it's actually been 4 or 5 top podcasts since we've actually done a crit. So it's been a little while.
Yeah.
So what do we have today?
All righty. Today we have a fantasy, and it starts with your favorite word. It starts with prologue, which I will be fine with, and you'll be like, I hate it.
Yeah. I
I
just
still, I maintain that a well-used prologue adds a lot.
hey, I wrote for my new Hamlet story that I'm writing, I wrote a prelude. I refuse to call it a prologue, but I wrote a prelude.
Prelude, prologue, anything that you honestly like. The thing is, it's part of the story, but it's not part of the story. It's a POV that you wouldn't normally use, or some piece of context or whatever, like Martin's, little episode with the others and so on. Like,
Right.
it sets a tone that
That
your main story needs, but doesn't have in its opening.
yeah, Game of Thrones is one of the few prologues that I actually feel had value.
Yeah.
Most just don't. Most just don't for so many reasons. But like, why did I do this prelude? It is the same POV character because it's Horatio who's the POV.
Mm.
But I did it for two reasons. One, Hamlet followed a 5 act play, and the first act of a 5 act play is to tell the audience the entire play up front, just spoil everything. I didn't want to do that, but I did want to honor that.
Mm.
So it's Horatio, way older, well after the events, talking directly to the reader, saying, this is why I want to tell this tale. This is what was entrusted to me, and this is why this is important. And then you go back in time. So it doesn't, I mean, everybody's read Hamlet or watched one of
Yeah.
the 13,000 movies that have been made of Hamlet. So it's not like I'm not going to spoil anything.
Or
Um,
somehow endured 4 hours of Kenneth Branagh's
right, right, exactly. So it's not, although I don't spoil anything in it, I still am, I am still a storyteller, so I'm gonna still do my job. But that's the reason. And yeah, so there is always a reason. But the problem is that most of the time, as we've discussed in nauseum, they're
It
just used incorrectly.
depends on your prologue,
Yeah.
right? If you're using it to info dump, I'm not a fan. If you're using it as, say, something that should be your first chapter, which is to say, like, it is a main POV that is part of the narrative cycle, that's maybe your character as a child. No, make that your first chapter. It doesn't need to be a
Right.
prologue. But
Right.
like yours, where you've got like a character looking back from the future, excellent use. You have a character that's not standard, like mine or Martin's, where you set up something. Good use. You have a
Yeah.
POV that you're going to kill in that prologue. Good use.
Yeah. But like the Stormlight Chronicles, as much as I love Sanderson, it it's not.
It was not a good prologue.
No. And then even worse than that was The Wheel of Time, which is my favorite series.
I disagree with you there. I've never read The Wheel of Time, but I love that prologue.
So here's the thing about that
Yeah.
prologue. When you read it from jump,
Yeah.
it makes so little sense. It is not connected to anything. Nothing really happens. You
Uh, it made
you're in the
sense to
head of this,
me.
huh?
It made sense to me.
How? You're in the head of a guy who's wandering around his house calling for his wife as he's stepping over her dead body because there's a guest
Because
there
he
who's
killed
saying,
her. That was
"No, I
so
know."
obvious to me.
Yeah, no, it I mean the dude that's there is like, I'm not going to let you not see this. You're going to see that you killed your wife. You're going to
Yeah.
see that you did all this stuff. And then the dude teleports and blows himself up.
Yes, and there's the very clear implication and imagery of rebirth and the wheel. So you're like, okay, so last time the guy tried to fix stuff, it ended really
But it
badly.
doesn't go into that. It doesn't go into the whole,
Yeah,
last time or this time or because he was the
but
first.
I don't need to know. It's like Catherine Kerr's wheel, and we're getting off topic, but Catherine Kerr's reincarnation series, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, she also has, well, she doesn't do it in the prologue. Actually, in the prologue, she has the soul before it's being born, and the Great One saying, "This time you have to try, you have to fix it," and then the soul goes to be born. That's all you get in the prologue,
Right.
right?
But see, that's different because it's this time you have. So here, let me finish.
Yeah.
Here's my issue. It's not that you don't understand that. It's that then he you don't understand why he killed his wife, what has happened. You don't get
Mm,
anything that this is a wheel or rebirth or anything like that. He teleports away, he blows up, and then you're a farm boy.
mm.
And it isn't until book 3 that something is said that tickles. There was something in book 3 that tickled my memory, and I was like, I feel like I know something about this, but I couldn't. I mean, I'm in book 3 now. I don't
Yeah.
remember anything. And so it made me go searching. And I actually went back to the first book. I was like, I think there's something that I read. And so I went back to the first book and I started flipping through it. And I couldn't really find anything until I went all the way to the prologue. And I was like, oh, and then the prologue was amazing.
Mm.
But you can't have a prologue that's amazing after you've read the third book.
I
Like,
don't know.
just put it as the epilogue of the third book.
I
Like,
really enjoyed the prologue, to be honest with you, and the prologue carried me somewhat into that book, but it didn't carry me past Matt.
yeah.
I cannot. I cannot get past that POV. Every time I hit Matt, I'm just like, I hate your guts so much.
Yeah. Yeah, the funny thing is the people that don't like that series, it's always one of the three boys, either Rand, Perrin, or Matt. Which is sad because the entire book is about Rand, Perrin, and
That's the problem, right? Like, I was okay with Rand, Perrin was fine, but Matt, oh, I just could not. It's
yeah,
like, you are such a whiny little crybaby. I cannot with you.
yeah, and he doesn't
No.
really change. But anyway, that's why I don't like the
Yeah.
prologue from Wheel of Time is because it just
Mm,
you forget about it, and I think that if I'm going to write something that the reader is absolutely going to forget about until
mm,
much later in the story where it actually matters, I
yeah.
think that's I think that's a waste of a prologue.
And then so I'm okay with that prologue, but I will say that while it's fine with Tad Williams and it's fine with J.R.R. Tolkien, if you use your prologue to infodump your world, I must tell you that that habit died in the 80s, and unlike 80s music, it should not come forward. It should stay there along with bell-bottom jeans.
Oh, Bell Bottom was 70s, but
and
yeah,
and and shoulder pads.
shoulder
Shoulder
pads was
pads should
80s.
never come
Shoulder
back.
pads was so 80s. Yeah, I'm rereading right now Elric of Melnibone because I haven't read it since
Yeah.
I was probably 14 or 15. And when I read audio because
Mm.
I can't, my dyslexia doesn't let me see the words.
Yeah.
And so even though I know it's poorly written, it's different. It's I go ugh versus if I was reading it, I'd literally be puking in my mouth and I just couldn't continue because I would want to edit and I can't edit in my head on an audio book. So I can go, wow, this is really telly, or wow, this is info dump heavy, or whatever, or wow, he's in every single character's head on every single page. But I can do it on audiobook because my dyslexia doesn't let me.
See,
And the story's there. I'm enjoying the story. But oh
I
my
can read
goodness.
past all of that. Like I've recently reread Tad Williams's Memory Stone and Sorrow,
Mm-hmm.
which is a great trilogy, a really enjoyable trilogy, and it's totally omniscient. 100% written omniscient, written very Tolkien-esque.
Mm-hmm.
But it was written in like the 70s. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like it's old as the
Yeah,
hills.
that's the thing. You're like, I will forgive you because you didn't know any better.
Well, yeah, because you wrote in the style of your times, and that's fine.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. So
100%.
I don't hold them to that level where I'm like, oh, you should be writing
Yeah.
like us today in our very
Yeah.
showy, very limited, very gripping emotional way. I don't do that. But I also couldn't read it if I was reading on a paper. I
Eh,
can't.
I can. I'm okay with that. I can get past it. Anyway,
Yeah, I can't in the audio, which is why I listen to the audio. And I'm walking every day, so
yeah.
when I'm out there for my 3 mile walk every day, it's a good
Anyway,
time to just listen
let me
to an audiobook.
share my screen
Yes.
and we will check out this human's prologue.
So while you're doing that, um, if you guys are out there listening, you should watch this on YouTube because we're going to share our screen so you can actually read along with us. If we do this once or twice a month where we critique somebody, if you would like to have us critique something, all you got to do is send less than 1,000 words. You'll notice every episode we very rarely get even a couple hundred words into it because we have so much to say. But there's no reason to send us more than 1,000 words. Usually it's best to send us the beginning because then we can dig into it from there. But if you want to send us something in the middle, we're fine with that. But just send it and the links are down below, but releasing your inner dragon at gmail.com. Please do note that it is for the live critique because we also, which we haven't done in a while, we also do first page reads where we collect a bunch of first page, from manuscripts and we read them with the mindset that we were the industry. So we were an agent or an acquisition editor or something like that. And we talk about when we, as the agent or acquisition editor, would stop reading and reject it. And so it's not a critique. And it definitely isn't from us. It has nothing to do with being because they aren't
Mm.
artists. They don't care. They're looking for they're really what they're doing is they're looking for red flags so that they can reject it quickly and move to the next one. They're not even looking for, like a lot of people think like, oh, well, they're looking for certain things so that they know that they could publish or whatever. No, they're actually looking to reject it. Matter of fact, I just wrote an 8,000 word Substack post on how to write a 1-page pitch synopsis for the industry. So there's a lot in there where I go in to talk about what the industry is actually looking for and why they have the mentality. And you have to understand this if you're going to be pitching to them because you have to understand your reader and they're your reader at that time. But anyway, so you can also do that same email address. Just make sure that you designate that you would like it for the first page read. How are we on that? How many do we have?
We don't currently have anything to queue. I should put out a post to make a call and tell people to,
Yeah.
chuck in their first page
Yeah.
reads
Cause we
again.
haven't done one. I know we haven't
I've
done one
done
this
one in a while.
season.
No. No, I
Yeah.
think it's time. We must go out and collect some.
Yes. So if you're interested in being a first page reads, please send us your first page. And again, we're not going to
Yeah.
critique it like we're going to do today, but we're definitely, we'll definitely critique it from an industry standpoint and from a sellability standpoint. And really not even from that, from a how quickly are you going to get rejected
Yeah.
standpoint, or can you hold up and keep the agents or acquisition editors interested in your piece? All right.
All
So
right. So as per
as I
usual,
always say when somebody says, so I wrote a prologue and I would like for you to tell me if it's successful or not. I always say, is the first word prologue? And they go, yes. And then you failed.
I disagree with that statement, and it is one
I
of
know,
our running disagreements.
I know. It's fine. It's fine.
Drake's
But yeah,
opinions are his own and do not reflect.
does any of does the funny thing is both of us are releasing your inner dragon, but do either of our opinions actually represent the opinions of
No,
releasing your inner
releasing your
dragon?
inner dragon has no opinions. It's a dragon.
That's right.
So, as per usual, I am going to read.
I,
Um,
actually, I'm gonna say one thing before you get started because that it's something we should say every time and we always forget and say it later or whatever. But you just said something to remind me. Do remember that we're going to be going through here and critiquing this. Most of our critiques are subjective. Most of our critiques are opinion based. They are not a, oh my God, you must do it this way or you suck. Some might be, you know, actual factual, if it's a punctuation or if it's something like that, those are factual. You need to understand grammar and so on and so forth. But 99% of the edits that we're going to talk about today are things that we think would improve the piece for us. So we're not saying, you have to follow it our way or you're dumb if you don't follow it our way or whatever. This is information for you guys to go, oh, this is how these guys think. This is
yeah.
how they think about their writing for when they're trying to make sure that their readers are very happy with what they're doing. So just understand this is very opinionated. Like, well, not that every episode is very opinionated.
It's very opinionated. We're opinionated people, but it is just our opinion.
Right.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to read as I normally do, and then we will comment as we go. Caeldraeus, keeper of cycles, lamented as he looked out over the wilds. A branch bore him high above the cliffs, the clouds swirling just out of reach. The bark below rooted him to the earth, and the leaves above whispered sullen words. Okay, I want to stop here just because I feel like this imagery, while it's great and I'm enjoying it, could benefit from a reordering, and for this reason. We're looking out over the wilds. Then we're high above the cliffs. We have the clouds above us. Then we look down because the bark below us is rooted to the earth. Then we look up again because the leaves above are whispering sullen words. And the kind of up down of the, obviously we don't look, but the kind of up down description jarred me a little bit. So I feel like it would be smoother to just rearrange this a little and kind of focus your reader's attention. So it goes like, a branch bore him high above the cliffs, the clouds swirling just out of reach. Underneath them, over his head, leaves whispered sullen words. The bark below him rooted him to the earth. So it
Yeah.
goes like clouds, leaves,
Yeah.
bark down into the earth.
Yeah. I talk about this all the time. When you're in limited, think like a visual director. It's a camera. So you're doing a camera pan. Instead of going dink, 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 you're going, we're going to start here and we're going to pan you down through this thing. My only negative to this is it doesn't need that as he looked, that
Yes.
kind of really telly filtery kind of thing. So that could be much more personal as far as a more active way to do it. However, that being said, I do love that everything else. We talked about this just even the last two
Yeah.
times in the writer's room where I talked about when you're writing in limited, the character is literally the center of the universe, not figuratively. This is the ultimate exercise in narcissism.
Mm.
And so what I try to teach them is to say, when you're writing in limited, think about it like this. You're not a storyteller,
Mm.
because when you're a storyteller, you're looking at your story, you're looking in it. You're the character looking out. You're telling the story from inside out, not from outside in. And so even though, yeah, I agree that it's a little herky jerky with the order and that could be smoothed out, it's very personal, you know.
It is, and there's the emotion. Also, I don't object so much to the looked out because it is him taking in his vista and he is lamenting over it, which is
Right,
interesting.
right.
You know,
No,
yeah,
I'm just saying it could be more active. It's the only thing that's
yeah,
kind of not as active as like the branch is bearing him up. It's doing something to him.
Mm.
The clouds are just out of his reach. Like it's how they are connected to him. The bark roots him to the earth. The leaves whisper to him. Like these are all very active, very
Mm.
central to that character. Beautiful, beautiful
Yeah.
imagery. And then we get this as he looked out.
Yeah.
So I'm
It
not
it
saying
it,
that it's bad.
it
I'm just saying that
yeah.
everything else is so good. Why have the one little weak
Yeah.
moment there when
So
we, I
I'll
mean, even something like as he cast his gaze out over the
yeah.
wilds, just something looked is just such a weak
Mm.
blase verb to have, especially having your opening line.
Mm.
The verbs are everything to us, and cast is so much more dynamic than looked.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying.
Yeah. But I will say that I really did enjoy the imagery and I really did
Mm-hmm.
enjoy the lamented. I think
Mm-hmm.
that that is an underused word. Very good. Overall, the opening paragraph is very good. I just wanted to comment on like the order because there
Mm-hmm.
is that herky jerky thing,
Mm-hmm.
you know, can
Yeah.
jar a reader. All right. The forest called to him, distressed, in the language of barren soil and hushed bird song. Rivers faltered as they sang their ceaseless songs, their flows choked and sluggish. Predators hunted with an urgency born of dwindling prey. Birds flew in erratic patterns, disorientated. Vines grew tighter around trees, and their thorns dug deeper into their victims. I'm going to stop here because I just want to highlight something to this author. The imagery is fantastic. I love the shows, but you are also telling because you don't think that we're going to get it. And I think you need to trust your imagery. So, like distressed and disorientated, those two specifically. It is clear from the language that the forest is distressed. Barren soil and hushed bird song shows the stress. You don't need to put the word on the page as well. Birds flew in erratic patterns are clearly disorientated. You
Yeah.
don't need the disorientation as well.
Yeah. Now the thing that I'll go a step further is none of this is actually connected to him. We've
Yes.
gone from this centralized everything is affecting me, and so I'm giving it to you as I see it. So because that first paragraph was so strong with that, it did let me down that you know what we're looking for is it's not about him describing the rivers and their faltering as they sang their ceaseless songs. It's not about the predators hunting. It's not about the birds flying erratically. It's about how do I see or feel about the rivers faltering as they sing? How does it affect me that the predators are hunting with an urgency? How does it change my world that the birds are flying erratically?
Now I
You know,
see that that emotion comes in the next three lines. But what would be great is if you could work that into the paragraph above and
yep,
have the two come together rather than giving us the description and then giving us the emotion like two separate layer cakes,
yeah,
right?
100%.
Try to mesh them. So the
Because
forest
if
called to him in the language of barren soil and hushed bird song. His gnarled wooden fingers tightened around the staff in his hand. Rivers faltered, their balance slipping, their flows choked and sluggish, something as to how it affects him.
well, yeah, but I mean, like on that rivers faltered, or the rivers faltering song tugged. I mean, I hate writing on my mouth. This is
Yeah,
kind of
it's my
cliche, but
problem as well.
but tugged at his heart. Their flows choking and sluggish, like the blood thickening in his veins, or whatever. I don't know. Like I said, I hate writing out of my mouth. But then you don't need, especially that 11. The 11 is so telly. The balance was slipping. First of all, there's a was in there, which is a good red flag that you're telling.
Hmm.
But the balance equals slipping. We don't do math, we do grammar. And so if you can turn it into a math equation, it's bad. And if you just pushed yourself a little bit harder on that second paragraph, closer to
Mm.
what that first paragraph is, you wouldn't need that. And then when your third paragraph could just be the inner monologue of humans, and it would have this massive impact, because we would get this negative feel from the rivers, and this negative feel from the predators, and this negative feel from the erraticness of the birds, because they would be affecting me. And then when I got the reason, the humans, now I'm going to feel the hate for them, or feel the whatever you want me to feel. I went with hate, but it could be disappointment, or
Yeah.
it could be fear, or whatever. But depending on how you make these lines personal to um, the keeper of the cycles, I can't say his
Yes.
name, sorry. Um,
Kyle Dreas.
Caldreas, yeah.
Dreas.
Um, it's You don't need to tell me the balance is slipping, for the
Yeah.
same reason why, birds flying in erratic patterns means they're disoriented.
Yes.
So that's where I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's sad, because he did such a good job with that opening paragraph.
Yeah. All right. So
Assuming that it's a
far,
he, it could be a she.
good, but you need to work those emotional shows throughout. All right.
Well, and here's a feather in your cap. We're 12 lines into this, and we are only critiquing very high level,
Yeah.
very technical story based stuff. We haven't said jack about sentence structure or writing, grammar,
Mm.
or the stuff that, like, once you get to this level, it's really refreshing for us, because we can really dig into some of the very high concept
Yeah.
edits, and not have to worry about, okay, so how you punctuate is like this.
Dialogue
So
punctuation works like this.
yeah, so feather in the cap, like, to the writer, um when you can get us just talking about these, like the camera pan order, like we would never mention that if we're worrying about, okay, so this isn't a sentence because you don't have a subject, so let's talk about that. Like, so just know
Yep.
that if the writers out there listening, us doing this level of editing is actually a huge compliment for you.
The living wall rose from the horizon, a bitter symbol of their broken trust. He had warned the other druids that the wall would not guard from the greed of men. How naive to assume that the short-lived creatures would hold their covenant through the generations. It was only natural that they would forsake their promises and invade the wilds. They weaseled their way into the jungle by any means necessary, despite the impenetrable barrier that stood between them. Many of them arrived by sea, circumventing the wall entirely. Others slashed and burned their way through, desperate for treasure. The rarity of their return did little to deter them, despite their repeated failures. Okay, so I'm going to pause here and say I liked the paragraph from 13 to 17, starting with a living wall and ending with a invade the wilds, because we get some of Kyle Dreas's interiority as well. He clearly is not naive. He doesn't think that he thinks that men are greedy, that they won't keep their promises, etc. But then the paragraph starting at line 18, they weaseled their way into the jungle, and ending at 22, despite their repeated failures, we get no interiority.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a statement of fact.
So the funny
So,
thing is, I'm
yeah,
exactly the opposite. Not that I disagree with anything you just said. I do think there's interiority in that one, which is awesome. But this writer's good enough to start hearing stuff like this. These two paragraphs, just like we were talking about above, have everything they need to be that one paragraph. So, like, the humans weaseled their way into the jungle by any means necessary, despite how much he warned the other druids of the greed of men. You know, this is still that thing where we could look at each one of these and go, what could I do that gives that personal feel? Because you're right, the second paragraph is
mm,
all, it's void of that interiority, but I think it actually has more meat as far
yeah,
as the story goes. So if we took these two paragraphs and fused them together and took the best from each, but made every one of them personal to him, how does he feel about these humans? Because we got the, like you said, This others slashed and burned their way through the forest, desperate for treasure. Okay, but that doesn't tell me how he feels about that, why it's hurting his world. And so again, if we just pushed ourselves a little bit more, this would be a really amazing, gripping piece, because
Mm.
now the fact that they're slashing and burning their way through desperate for treasure means something, because it means something to me, because am now falling in to becoming this character. And so now I'm going to start not liking, like, this is just okay, yeah, they're slashing and burning their way through the forest, okay, great, well, like,
Yes.
okay, as opposed to, oh, those rotten bastards,
Yeah.
you know. And you just, it literally is that next step for this writer. They've got their flow pretty good, they've got their grammar, they've got their sentence structure, all this is really nice. And they do have, if people are paying attention, we've been going, look, right here you have this, and right
Yeah.
here you don't. And if you just, so it's not even like a piece of it is missing.
Yeah.
It's just, I loved what you just said earlier. It's layers of a cake
Yeah.
instead of being just one delicious cake.
Yes.
You've separated them
They're
out.
very separated at the moment, and it would
Yeah.
be great if the interiority was combined with the plot. Caladris raised his staff, summoning a torrent of leaves that swirled around him and lifted him off the branch. He drifted forward, slowly falling out over the canopy as the whirlwind controlled his descent. The leaves that formed his cloak danced on the wind, wishing to join those circling around him. Okay, so I'm going to stop there because I want to talk about why it's really important to show how your character feels about magic. Magic is one of the core elements of the fantasy, right? You Magic is basically like the heart of many fantasy realms. And
It's what
especially
separates
when
fantasy from all other genres.
yeah, and especially when you're talking about a druid who's using nature magic. He's using the natural world all around him that he is very connected with. How does it make him feel to call on magic? And I know this guy's an old druid, he's well connected to it. All of the rest of that, it's familiar to him as breathing. I get it. But you still need to give something to the reader. Is it a joy? Is it an effort? Is it a fear of dominating nature? What goes through him when he uses magic? Give us some sense of wonder.
100%. The caveat to that would be avoid, like the plague, as you know, dialogue. Because you're
Yes.
right. This is an older druid that has been around. He is seasoned. He is skilled. He's not going to go, and I hate the little cliche lines, like it was the first time the thrill rushed through. No, he's like 103, whatever. He's 3,012 years old. Like, that thrill has not that
No,
thing.
it's blunted, and that's fine. But still give us some
Oh, yeah.
interiority here. Like, even if it's muted interiority, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
interiority, that's been he's felt it 1,000 times before, still give us something here. It's magic, my dude.
Yeah.
Come on, this
Well,
is the
but it's even
heart
it's
of the
even more
story.
important than that,
Yeah,
because Caldrias is not real.
yeah,
I'm the only thing that's real here. And I want to experience what this is. So, yes, I want to do it in a way that doesn't throw me out of the story. In other words, not a, as you know, Bob dialogue kind of thing. But he's not real. He's not actually doing
yeah,
any of this stuff. I'm the only one doing anything. I'm reading, I'm experiencing. Everything you write is for me. And so when you miss that magic, what you're doing is you're not understanding why, one of the very important reasons why a reader is attracted to your genre.
yeah,
You are missing fulfilling. Remember, we as storytellers are flat out, we are here to fulfill someone else's fantasy. That's what we are. And so what you're doing here is you're missing an opportunity for somebody who actually came here hoping to get fulfilled with this sense of wonder over magic, and you're just not giving it to them.
yeah.
And so it's not about, so if the writer was thinking, well, I mean, he is a seasoned druid, he wouldn't think about any of this stuff, right? That's what makes this moment so hard, is because you have to write it in a way that doesn't feel stupid.
Mm.
But he's not real. The reader's real. And so you have to make us feel that. So I'm 100% on board.
Yeah.
Um,
So I think you need some interiority here.
yeah. I do have one mundane thing. 24 slowly falling. So I'm not a Nazi against ly adverbs, but they're always a tell.
Yeah.
And what I teach is there's three ways you do not want to use an ly adverb, and this is one of those three ways. This is the worst of those three ways. The worst way to use an ly adverb is when you've chosen the wrong verb. And so what you're doing is you're using an ly adverb to either strengthen or weaken the verb. In this case, we're weakening the verb because he didn't drift forward and fall.
Yeah.
So we have to weaken that verb. And so that's what the slowly does. Now, I would probably use drifted here and then do a different verb for the forward one. He glided forward and drifted down, or he drifted forward and glided down. I mean, there's just, you can use a word.
Yeah,
That
glided and
means,
drifted is probably your best bet.
that's what I like, but I mean, it's subjective.
Yeah.
But understand, you have used that ly adverb because you chose the wrong verb, no other reason. And so recognizing, oh crap, I'm using ly adverb to weaken a verb because it's just the wrong verb.
Mm.
We write in the English language that has 30 words that mean the same thing, but all evoke different feelings and emotions and everything like that. So now he glided forward, drifting out over the canopy. That paints a picture that slowly falling never will.
Yeah.
So be careful with your ly adverbs. I use them every page. I'm
Yeah.
not, saying don't use ly adverbs. What I am
I'm not
saying
an
is don't use them
yeah.
poorly.
I'm not an ly adverb like anti either. I think they're fine in their place, but don't use them to weaken verbs. Don't use them to strengthen verbs.
And
Use
then
the right one.
the other two ways are when you use them redundantly, like, you know,
Yeah.
he quickly sprinted, or he whispered quietly, or he
Mm.
shouted loudly. Like, there's no other ways to do those things. And then the other is just when they don't do anything. I don't have an example of that off the top of my head, but you'll have an ly verb that doesn't strengthen, weaken, it doesn't augment, it literally doesn't do nothing.
Yeah.
Like it was, I don't know, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I've seen them all. You see them often as well, where the adverb just doesn't do anything. It doesn't add anything. It doesn't take anything away. So why is it even there? Like, if you cut it, it changes literally
Isn't that
nothing.
the same as redundant? So shout it loudly or whatever.
Well, but I see them as different because shouted loudly, there's no other way to shout. Whereas I wish I could, I need to memorize one like I've done the other, because every time I go into this,
In the
I was hoping.
meantime,
Yes.
let's continue.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, the air was thick with the sweetness of flowers and damp moss, but was polluted with the acrid sting of smoke coming from beyond the border. Okay. I like the juxtaposition, but not like it's written on the page. I feel like the order of words is wrong here. The cool part of the first part of the sentence is the sweetness of flowers. So I would suggest putting that first and going like, the sweetness of flowers thickened the air. And then
And
for
this is
the
where we get into that.
yeah.
This is where we get into that. Look for your wases. Wases are not bad. You cannot write a manuscript without the word was. You can't. It's impossible. However, they are always red flags.
Yeah.
So this is written in passive voice, and so that's why it's a red flag.
Yeah.
We're going to flip it around because the air is not doing anything. The air is not doing the thickening.
Yeah.
The sweetness of the flowers and the damp moss is doing the thickening. And so it's in passive voice because the subject, the air, is not doing the action. By flipping it around, now we get the thing that is doing the thickening doing the
Yeah.
thickening. And so now it's an
And
active voice.
yeah. And what I also want to do is I want to do the juxtaposition in a stronger way than with the but.
Mm-hmm.
Because the but doesn't feel strong in this case, especially not with a very weak word coming. So, like acrid smoke,
Billowed,
willow,
invaded,
not
breached.
border, the stench, the faint stench, the creeping stench, wrinkling his nose.
Yeah. And now we've made it active. We've put it connected to the character. It's affecting the character. It's strong. It's visceral. It's visual.
Yeah.
It's what we want.
And the juxtaposition I feel stands out more without the but. You don't need the
Yeah.
but to show the juxtaposition. It's there in the text.
Yep.
Okay. The humans grew bolder. I like that. They burned what little forest remained on their side of the wall, as if daring the land to fight back. Beneath them, the soil had hardened into lifeless stone. Animals vanished into the safety of the wilds, and the rivers bore no sustenance. Their world was hollowing out. Yet still the humans pressed on, spurred by their ambition. Fools. So I like this, but at the same time, like I don't think you need had there, for example. Like I can pick out nitpicky things here where I think you can just strengthen it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, things like don't use past perfect, you don't need it.
Right.
Beneath them, the soil hardened into lifeless stone. You don't need had. It, you know,
Yeah. You don't need the
it,
passport in this moment.
yeah.
I am not a fan of the last line. Their world was hollowing out because again, you've just showed me that.
Yeah,
You've just shown me that the world
yeah,
is hollowing out. And it's just a tell and it's not personal to him. And like, even if it was a tell, but it gave me his feelings on it, like how it was destroying him.
mm.
Um, like his own beating heart being torn from his chest, the world was being hollowed out. Like, even if it
Or
was the same tell.
or the hollowness of their world echoed in his aching body. Something,
Yeah.
some way to like connect the two things. So, so a couple of nitpicky things, but I like the overall of this section. He stopped himself just above the canopy, waving his staff in a wide arc to dismiss the swirling vortex. Leaves shot around him, and he fell through a gap in the canopy as they fluttered in the breeze. So I feel like this could maybe do with some lyricism, some a little bit more lyrical feel to the prose. Um, and also, like you've got some repeats here with canopy, canopy, and canopy.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's an echo that it, there's other words for canopy and it's not a good echo.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I don't think you need it in that first sentence. You could just go, he waved his staff in a wide arc to dismiss the swirling vortex. Leaves shot around him, or I wouldn't use necessarily shot, but leaves shot around him, and he tumbled through a gap in the canopy. Because I also don't feel you need this as they fluttered in the breeze. I think there's plenty of imagery here, and I'd rather use like fluttered in there. So like leaves fluttered around him, and he fell through a gap in the canopy.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm driving at here is don't excessivate. That's not a word,
Mm-hmm.
but don't excessivate your
We're fantasy authors. We can make up words.
yeah, your descriptions. Keep, don't add unnecessary clauses to add additional descriptions because you use the word like shot, because you use the verb like shot. Rather take that fluttered and put it in place of the shot and keep
Mm-hmm.
the description more concise but stronger
Well,
than
also when we add this extra
longer.
clause on this sentence, I mean, we're getting really technical on this, but as
Yeah,
if again, it goes back to what we talked about in that very first beginning. Think about the camera, think about the visual movie that we're created. So
yeah.
we've got leaves shot out around him. Okay, I can see that as he fell through the gap in the canopy. Okay, I can see that. And he fell through the gap in the canopy as they fluttered out. First of all, what is they?
Mm.
Because is they the gap in the canopy? Is they him and whatever? Does it point back to the leaves? That vague pronoun kind of gets there, but we've already kind of given us that. We've already described the leaves, and so now we're going back to the leaves at the end of this sentence, and it doesn't help the imagery. So yeah, if we just leaves fluttered out around him as he fell through the gap in the canopy, now I can see that just in one fluid motion. The camera's panning with it. If I really want to get what happens to the leaves after that, I'm going to do that as a next sentence, because then that'll break it out and I will have seen the leaves, even if I do shot out, leaves shot out around him as he fell through the canopy. Boom. If I want to then continue the visual of the leaves, not having it as a tagged on clause at the end of this one and bringing it into its own sentence and allowing me to experience that visual moment, I think would be a better way to handle that.
So yeah, I think like I would shorten the description like this, and I feel that that makes it a stronger description. So what I've
Mm-hmm.
replaced that paragraph with is, he waved his staff in a wide arc to dismiss the swirling vertex. Leaves fluttered around him as he fell through a gap in the canopy.
Yeah. And then, like I said, we could add, like, oh, I really want to show what the leaves are doing. Again, I'd make it personal. So something in the effect of, and I wouldn't use leaves because this is an echo, but I hate writing on my mouth. But anyway, the leaves, so like I said, we use leaves shot out around him.
Mm,
Up there, we could do something like the leaves fluttered down like the broken remnants of his soul. Get that personal. I'm feeling pain. I'm feeling this,
yeah,
and so on and so forth.
yeah. So use the leaves to kind of represent
Yeah,
that broken
as
aspect.
symbolism.
Yeah,
Yeah, as a symbolism, kind of, or as a metaphor to kind of show that
and 100% that would make for a
if I
very
need
good
that.
piece of interiority. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're not saying don't do this extra stuff or whatever. It's just that look at the way you're doing it. Think about that camera. Think about the reader and what they're going to be experiencing. And so the way you have it up there is just two visuals of the leaves divided by an action between that he does, which separates them, and it doesn't add anything. As they fluttered in the breeze doesn't do anything extra. So that's why Marie went to let's just let them flutter in the beginning, because it's fine. The second, the second brought back of that doesn't do anything. But now if we do like this, now we're adding in a metaphor and showing his interiority of how he is interacting with the world around him,
Yeah.
and then the leaves become something painful.
So what I just said is, their fluttering path crumpled like the broken promises of humans, edges scraping against them.
Yeah.
And I mean that is very rough, but something like that.
Right.
The forest parted for him, its branches bowing as he plunged to the earth. The ground surged upward, but he landed with a resounding impact, his stance unbroken. Roots and tendrils curled to greet him as his feet sank into the soil. When his staff met the ground, a ripple of energy spread outward, awakening the wilds to his presence. The jungle held its breath. Okay, but
So
did he hold his breath?
I don't mind the metaphor, but I will say this writer already wins. Like
Yeah.
he wins the gold star. He didn't put an S on the end of his ward word, so he's got. I'm done. I'm done. This is the best writer ever, and he or she has done no wrong. I
So I don't mind the metaphor of the jungle holding its breath. I would like interiority from
Yeah,
Childer's here.
yeah, yeah. There's no interiority. It's all just factual visual descriptions. Maybe a little bit of sensory as far as the
Mm,
feel sensor sense when his feet
yeah.
sink.
Yeah.
But I mean, even the ripple of energy spreading outward, that's not, it doesn't do anything to him. He doesn't feel it. It doesn't rip through
Yeah.
him or whatever. So we get the sensation of his feet sinking into the soil, but we don't get any sensation off
But
of
we
energy
don't.
rippling
Yeah,
out.
we get roots and tendrils curling to greet him and his feet sinking to soil, but there's no actual sensory here. And the
That's what I
thing is,
said.
yeah.
I said you get it's at least gives me that feeling of,
Mm.
the sink.
But the
You're
thing
right.
is,
It's not actual internal.
when you have the opportunity to use feeling and taste in any piece of prose, take it, because
Hmm.
we so rarely get like naturally occurring moments to taste things and feel things and so on.
And
Like
smell's the other one.
yeah, smell is the other one. So because most people will put in sound and hearing, but when you get the opportunity for the others, take it. And you've got a great opportunity right here.
Yeah, what I try to teach is on every single page. So we have six senses that we can play with as
Mm,
writers. You get the five physical senses: sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. But you also get interiority, that is in your POV character. So what I
mm,
tell people is you need to make sure a minimum of three of those is used on every single page. You're always going to use visual, so that's a given. You're always going to use interiority, so that's a given, which means you need one of the others: taste, touch, sound, or smell. You really should try and work in four per page. So that means you got the two givens, interiority and visual, and then you get two of the four remaining ones on every page. And it doesn't have to
yeah.
be much. You know, in that opening paragraph, he had one of them. I want to say, I don't remember which one it was, but there was something about smell or something. Maybe it was in the second
Yeah, he
paragraph or
did.
whatever.
I'm not sure it
Um,
was here, but it with the moss and the
yeah,
smoke.
there
That
was
was
the
great.
moss
Yeah,
and smoke and stuff like
yeah.
that. So that's
No, 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 he's
the
got it.
opportunity to
I'm
bring.
just saying you've got an opportunity here
Yeah,
with a yeah.
yeah.
There's a lot of rustling leaves. I'm just saying, like it's
Leaves
it's
are
starting to
becoming
become
an echo.
noticeable that these leaves be rustling. Leaves rustled in the shadows behind him, and he turned. He what?
Yeah. Again, you're using an ly adverb to weaken a verb because you used the wrong verb. He didn't turn, so you have to use
I
leisurely to
I
augment it.
grant you that that English is not my first language, and that I could be completely incorrect. But I don't understand how you turn like he
He's trying to
turned
say that he
leisurely. Does that
turned.
mean he turned into a leisure?
No, no, he turned in a leisurely fashion. In other words, he slowly turned. He just didn't want to use the word slowly. That's the image that he's trying to paint with this
No,
leisurely.
100%. But then you should say he turned in a leisurely fashion, because leisurely by itself,
Yeah, I think. I mean, I don't know, but maybe that he was like, oh, I can't use slowly. That's too crappy of an ly adverb. So let me use leisurely. Um,
I don't
but
know. Like
again,
that doesn't feel like correct English. This piece doesn't feel like it feels like he's saying he turned into a leisure.
yeah, I mean, no American reader is going to be tripped by that,
Okay.
um, because we are used to kind of bending and flexing and all of that. Um, but again, look at the verb turned. It's blasé, it's crappy, it's mundane, it's bland, and it's too strong for what you're
Mm.
trying to do. So your having to ly adverb it to augment it. And I promise you, there are other words that you could use there that would paint that picture better.
Yep. There definitely are. There is a site called One Look, which
Mm-hmm.
you should have open. And if you go to the thesaurus and you look at turned, you can have revolved, rotated, um, morphed, which is where I was like imagining him turning into a leisure. Glanced over his shoulder. You've got a lot of options.
Well, you know, I just went to it and just looking at a few things: swiveled, pivoted, rotated,
Yeah,
twisted. Some of those still might be too strong, but yeah, sometimes it takes a few minutes to actually, you can even extend it, taking it all in, whatever. There's
yeah.
I hate writing out of my mouth.
All right, so onwards. Thyroxus, keeper of beasts, ambled between the trees, followed by a small group of woodland critters. It was astounding that the druid could move so silently, even in this form.
Yeah. Followed is another bland vanilla
Land
word for
word,
verb.
yeah. I'm not crazy about this. It, it's fine. It's just,
So for me, something like this, if I wrote that line, and I'm not saying that I haven't written a line like that, when I'm in editing mode, again, the was would be a red flag for me.
yeah,
It would get my attention. I actually do an edit where I highlight every single was, and I read
yeah,
every
me
single
too.
sentence that the was in. So I would go, oh, it was astounding. First of all, as a was ing, and I don't like to was ing my action verb.
Mm,
Um, but also it wasn't just astounding to the ether, it was astounding to my POV.
yeah,
So I might just switch this really quickly to it astounded POV character that the druid moved. And then
yeah,
just even that little fix makes it
yeah,
stronger.
yeah.
Anytime you have a was and then an ing verb following it, there was somebody that read last night in the writer's room. I guess it's the second time that I did that. Why don't we take a break and let me tell them about the writer's room real quick. Are you ready to take your writing to the next level? Well, you need to head on over to writersroom.us and join me in the writer's room. First of all, there's a free section. Now, you don't get access to everything in the free section, but you do get access to a lot of things. Like I do a monthly critique group in there. So you can bring your stuff in, get critiqued by me, and be critiqued by others and critique others. I do a Q&A every month for a free section. You can join us live as we're recording Releasing in Your Dragon. That's a part of the free stuff. There's a whole bunch of things. But yes, the magic does happen if you become a full member. Now, I get it. There's a lot of other websites out there that are membership sites to help you become a better writer. I'm not saying they don't do that for you. What I am saying though is us writers are broke, and most of them are charging $200, $300, $400. I've even seen them for $800 a month. That's insane for a starving writer. We are trying to be much more in line. Now, the normal price of the writer's room is going to be $100, and you'll get access to everything that I'm talking about here. But for the first 250 members who join, because we are kind of in that building mode and we're adding things and so on and so forth, you'll get it for 50% off for life. So for $49 a month, you get multiple critique groups that you can come to every single week. I do a class in there every month. I do a writing workshop in there every month. I do a development pod every month in there where you can actually sit down with me, and me and you together can work on any problem areas that you might be having in your story. Maybe it's a weak character arc or a sagging middle, or you don't feel the ending is quite punchy enough. Well, you want to sit down with me and bounce some ideas to see if that helps you with your stuff? You have access to that in the writer's room, and so much more. A writing contest for a publishing contract, all sorts of things. So if you really are serious about writing and you really want to take your writing to that next level, then you should head on over to the writersroom.us and join me in the writer's room. All right, and we're back. So again, anytime you have that was ing verb, most of the time it just needs to be an ed verb. And I'm talking about the last two letters. So the ing at the end of the verb, you can turn it to an ed at the end of the verb, and you can cut the was. But somebody
Yeah.
read last night, and there was a lot of was ing in almost every single one of this writer's action verbs, and it's so passive.
All right. His towering figure resembled a bear, but the rugged fur of his head and shoulders gave way to gnarled roots spiraling around his limbs and chest. Ribbons of moss and clusters of autumn-hued leaves decorated the spaces between the roots, while his claws jutted out like shards of stone. Above his shoulders, the roots splayed outward in a silhouette of antlers, jagged and untamed. So everything is fine except the resembled a bear, which is a little weak and is
Well,
very easily fixable with something like his his bear-like figure
yeah,
towered
right. I also have one other problem.
companions.
Information order.
Yeah.
That last line up there on 50, to me, feels like it needs to go after the description. Like, because we get, it astounded him that the druid, or, it astounded the druid that, it
Mm,
astounded him that the druid could move silently in this form. But I don't know what this form is. And
yeah.
then you tell me this form, as opposed to give me the form, let me see it, and then go, it's astounding that he could move this quietly while he looked like that, the thing
Yeah.
you just saw. And then that line has more impact on me.
Also, this line, the last line above his shoulders, should ideally be right after the description of his head.
Mm-hmm. Again, camera pan.
Yeah,
Think about that camera pan.
because
It
you want to think about how the camera's going, as you say, over the body.
This is like the third time we've talked about this, but I don't think people really think about this. They think that you're just seeing things in your mind, but that's not how the human brain
Yeah.
normally works. The human brain paints a picture kind of in the same way because we watch so much video. And so we're
Mm,
trained to kind of, the camera starts at the head and then it moves down to the feet. Like we're predisposed to kind of want that. And when you bounce around, it just isn't as fluid. Is anybody going to notice it? I mean, that's the thing. A lot of these things that we're talking about here are things that will 100% improve the piece, but not doing them doesn't destroy the piece.
yeah.
It just makes it that much smoother,
Yeah.
that much more impactful. And it does add up in a
Mm,
100,000 word manuscript when you have this level of detail, this level of critique of looking at
mm,
things and really making sure everything is smooth.
yeah. So it will improve the piece, but nothing here is like death. This is all
Yeah, no,
good
I
so
mean,
far. Yeah.
this is gonna I would keep reading this. There's nothing in here like I was talking about with going back to Eldon from Mountain Bone. There is nothing in here that would make me go, oh, I gotta
Yeah.
go brush my
Yeah.
teeth now because I just puked in my mouth. Nothing.
If I was just reading, I would just keep happily
Oh
reading.
yeah,
I
yeah,
might think like I would have used a stronger verb here, but it would be a very passing thought.
yeah, yeah. No,
Not
this
like
is
I must stop and fix this.
right.
Yeah.
Not like a oh my god, really.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
no, this has been good. This has
Yeah.
been one of the better pieces that we've critiqued, which is why we've stayed at this high level so much
Yeah.
and very rarely come down into the weeds.
What news, Theraxis? The critters scattered as he split the silence, and the other druid continued lumbering forward toward Kael'Daras. As he did, he shifted into the form of a man. A carapace of knotted roots and bark blended with a cloak of dark brown hide adorned with feathers and moss. His face was defined by short tusks, wooden antlers, and a shaggy grey mane. The musk of,
Was
yep, lots of was. Lots of was going on here.
Well, some of the wases are fine because some of them are
Yeah,
just linking verbs. So some of them are just the sky was blue. But that last one, his
yeah,
face was defined. Short tusks defined, or short Tuscan antlers defined a face covered by a shaggy gray mane.
yep,
Again, this is when this was is in passive voice because his face isn't defining anything. So the subject is not doing the action, meaning we're in passive voice. It's
Yeah.
the short Tuscan wooden antlers that are defining the face. So they're the subject doing the action. So just flipping that around, you see those wases and you go, oh, it's passive voice, flip, and bam, you're in active voice. And it's just so much stronger.
So just in case anybody needs the verbal of that, that is short tusks and wooden antlers defined a face covered in shaggy grey mane.
I'd probably do with a, but instead of in, but
Oh, with a, yeah.
so, but I mean, for you kids at home playing, for you kids playing at home, look at how much more. And again, does it destroy this piece having his face was defined? No, it does not. This one is just that tad bit stronger. We get to see the short tusks, we get to see the wooden angles, and we get to see them defining the face, as opposed to the seeing a face and then finding out what did something to it.
Yes.
It's that order that we're painting in the brain that makes the read so much more fluid.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, very easy catch is just watch your wases.
Yep.
And if you can easily eliminate them by flipping the sentence, then it's passive voice and flip the
Yeah.
sentence.
Yeah. And we've talked about this many times, but I do want to take a
Yeah.
second to go through it. If you're in Word, they've kind of hidden the find and replace, but if you hit Control Alt H, it will bring up your replace box. And then you'll have two lines. One will be the find and one will be replace. In the find, there you go. She put it up on the screen. In the find, put was. In the replace, put was. Um, stay on the find. You got to click on the find box up there. No, I mean in the replace the top one, and then click match whole words only, find whole words only, and then click on the replace. You got to click on the replace box. Nope, up top.
No, because what
Yeah,
you
if
want
you
to
do.
do is you want to go to font. I think
Oh,
it's
you do it
font or
different than me.
highlight.
So
There it
how
is.
yeah, but you're still on find. So if when you're on find, it's now going to find highlighted whole words.
Oh,
So that's why I was saying you have to click on replace before you click highlight, and you'll have to click on find and get rid of the highlight now. And I
I
think you have
have
to do it twice.
a macro that does all this.
Yeah, me too. So basically, what she did was she went to the find box, she typed in was, and then before I leave that, I actually go down and click the find whole words only. Then I
Mm.
click the replace box, type in was, and I go down to format and I click highlight. And then I choose a really obnoxious highlight color. And then you just hit replace all. And it will go through and it will literally replace every single was in the entire manuscript. And once they are highlighted this and they stand out, and there's not many in this, this is a pretty active, again, the writing of this is good, but
Mm.
now you can't ignore them.
Yeah,
You
because they're
can't miss
clear.
them because they just jump out and slap you in the face. They're like, was slap.
Yeah.
And so when you're in editing mode, now you're reading through and you're like, his face was slap. Oh, okay. Let me look at that was. Um, and so that's why doing this highlight trick in Word will just help you never. And again, you cannot write a manuscript without the word was. We're
Yeah.
not saying that. Um, but every one of them is a red flag that could be a sentence that probably can be improved by just taking a second to look at that sentence and seeing if it's passive voice or if it's a passive verb or is it just a blase way of saying
Mm.
it. So, but sometimes the sky was blue. It's fine. That's just a linking verb, and linking verbs are linking verbs. They need to happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes his hair was shaggy. Okay, great. His hair was matted and filled with maggots. Okay, great.
Yeah.
It just was that. But then again, his matted, maggot-filled hair, whatever.
Maggots filled his matted hair.
Yeah, maggots filled his maggot. Maggots worm their way through his matted
Yeah.
stench
but either
Wow, we're
way,
really
like,
destroying this character.
but either way, like it helps you to see your was's
Yeah.
and decide if you really want to keep them. Because that's what
Yeah.
it's about, right? If you're happy with the was, keep the was. If you can make it stronger, or if you think you can make it stronger, make it stronger.
Yeah. So somebody in the peanut gallery said, define a face covered with or surrounded by, and a question mark. That there is no
No.
there. That's all subjective. So yeah, all of it works. A face
Yeah.
covered with a shaggy beard, a covered by a shaggy beard, surrounded by a
Surrounded
shaggy
by.
beard, shrouded with a, like, at that point you're now just, how do you, how does your voice kind of take that description? But no matter how you do it, what we've done is we've gone away from that passive, his face was defined.
Yeah. So I think overall for this author, my takeaway for the author would be a little bit careful of your passive voice. You don't have a lot of it, but it's worth eliminating all of it. Don't,
Or, I mean, sometimes passive voice is the right thing.
yeah,
Um,
but none of these
sometimes
were per se.
I don't think so. I think every one of
Yeah.
them would, that we popped, would have
Yeah.
been just that smidge improvement, that smidge improvement, that smidge improvement. And you get 50 smidges in a chapter.
Yeah.
That's a smack of an improvement and not just a
But what I
smidge.
think what I think you should really take away from this as well is like try and combine your interiority with your descriptions into the same paragraphs and sentences. And don't tell as well as show.
Yeah.
Trust your showing to give the right emotion. You don't
Yeah.
need to also tell me.
I think this writer is right on the cusp
Yeah.
of stepping into the domain of impressive storyteller.
Yeah.
They're a good storyteller.
Mm,
There's no doubt about that. But I think if they push themselves and just kind of, a lot of it is just changing the dichotomy of how you think, or
mm,
not the dichotomy, that's not the word I'm looking for, the paradigm of how it's just that paradigm shift where you think just a little different. So that interiority, what I've been trying to push with my people is, don't write the story looking into the story as a storyteller. Write the story inside of that character looking out. And this is, of course, I'm
yeah.
talking about when you're writing in limited, third limited, or first person. That paradigm shift will help you think about it differently. And so you'll write it differently. And then, when you're in editing mode, you're not going to not write passive voice. We speak very passively in how we talk. And so that sneaks into our first puke draft. But when you're in editing mode, doing that, find and replace, highlighting all your was's, make a macro like me and you have, then you'll be in editing mode and you just can't ignore them when you hit them. And it makes it so much more time effective to do your editing pass with all your was's already highlighted so that you just hit them as you're going through. This writer is right at the cusp. They if they just, and again, this is one of those things that, could you just go, well, I don't want to spend that extra time and I just want to publish it like this? Sure. And for the most part, you're going to be fine. But I think the biggest thing that I try to impart upon my people, the reason why quality is such a huge thing for me and for you, is we aren't competing each other. Me and Marie don't compete against each other as authors at all. I mean, if she sells a book to a reader, there's an ample chance that I'm going to sell a book to that reader, or vice versa. We're not in competition with each other. And I hate that writers think that. We are in competition with the noise, just the sheer volume of choices. And so if you can rise above the noise with quality, that will help you in your career about as much as you can. I mean, luck is still the number one factor of whether you're successful as a writer or not. But pushing yourself on these little things, readers do, they might not notice, oh wow, there's no passive voice in this. I guarantee you they won't say that, but they will go, this, I don't know, this book just pulled me in a little deeper than any other book that I've read. Like,
Mm.
that's what they'll do. And they'll go, and because of that, I wonder what else this writer has written, because this one really, it just felt better. And so let me look for more of this writer. And so that's the reason why both me and you push people as hard as we
Yeah.
do on that, just those little tweaks to push it that much further, because you are competing against the noise. You are not
Yes.
competing against individual authors, though.
Yeah. I think you have every opportunity here to
Yeah.
really to get there. Like you that this was good.
Now,
It could be great.
all that being said, I'm going to poo poo on it. Now, we
Mhm.
didn't get very far because we never
Mm.
do. But because of the fact that I know it's a prologue, and because of the fact that I know I'm in some grandiose head of some greater druid of from days gone by, I'm never getting connected to that character. And so that's one of the things I don't like about prologues is I want you to connect immediately to my character. I want you to care about that character and care about their plight and their concern and their struggles.
So I am still going to push back against that
Oh
and
yeah,
say that
I want you to.
this might be a case where these druids are setting up a world in the
Mm-hmm.
same way as George R. R. Martin set up the world with the others.
Mm-hmm.
It cannot be a chapter one because they are
No,
not part of the central POV
yeah, no,
story.
no. This is definitely a if
Yeah,
this exists, it's definitely a prologue. I will agree with that. This
yeah,
feels like it absolutely is not a chapter one. So
yeah,
that trap is avoided. Another trap of prologues is when you're like, oh, I'm doing my prologue to show you what the character cares about. And it's like, yeah,
yeah,
but I don't care about your character. So why would I care about what they care about?
yeah.
That's another trap
So
that's so prevalent.
I think this prologue does its job as a prologue because I feel like, as
Well,
I
we
say,
don't know
you know,
that
we
yet
haven't
because we didn't
finished
get
it,
far enough.
and we don't get chapter one, obviously, but I feel like
Right.
this prologue does its job in setting up this conflict of the world, and then we're going to meet a POV who's smaller than these druids,
Right.
and who's going to kind of take us through this, and that's going to be our chapter one. But we're going to have the larger context of the world from these two druids and their conversation, which I think is what
Right.
the author was trying to set up. And I feel
100%.
like in a fantasy story, when you can't always give that wider context from the narrow POV, right? Because the POV is of necessity limited,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to paint the wider context, then a prologue like this, I believe, does a great job of that. And it hooks the reader because the reader's looking for fantasy and you're giving the reader grandiose fantasy. You're setting up high fantasy in your prologue.
Let me push back.
Okay?
Because I agree with you. I agree with you. First of all, I don't agree that it does the job because we didn't get far enough to see
Yeah.
whether it actually does the job or not. I will agree that it didn't hit any of the traps and it feels like it's going to do the job. I will
Mm.
agree with you there. My pushback is, does the story, does the reader require to know the bigger picture before they get into the limited state? And that can't be answered unless you read the entire piece, like not just the prologue, but like the whole thing. So one of the reasons why I think prologues, even when they don't fall into the stupid stuff, still are unneeded, because I would rather my character or my reader experience the world raw, as that novice, as that person that doesn't see it, and let me grow the danger and the problems and everything, and let the reader experience it from the ground up, as opposed to starting at the top and going, here's the problem of the world, and then getting into the character and moving. And I'm not saying that that there's not an argument for stories that no, the reader actually must know the big picture before they get into the weeds. That there's probably stories out there like that. My pushback is that for me, most of the time, I feel the reader is going to benefit from learning the big picture without knowing it. And so that's my pushback. So I agree with you. It didn't fall in any of the stupid stuff. It feels like it's going to do the job that it is. And it may be a story that the reader must have this information or they will not be affected by the journey to grow it.
So
100%.
so much as you are saying we didn't get far enough to say it'll do the job, I'm going to say we didn't get far enough because we didn't get to chapter 1 to know if we need the
Right.
context.
100%. That's why
Because
I'm
it
being
might
very vague
be,
here.
yeah. So it might be that the context is critical. And I
Yep.
like prologues. I like the fantastical prologues.
Yep.
I'll tell you why. Okay. To me, that the prologue is a chance, if used correctly, it's a chance for the author to set an atmosphere of fantasy that
Mm-hmm.
they cannot do in chapter 1. Okay. Because in chapter 1, of necessity, you're dealing with a small
Mm-hmm.
protagonist that's going to grow,
And
right?
you're also dealing with trying to set up the mundane world of that character. Even if it is
Yes.
fantastical, it's still the mundane world of
It's
that
their,
character.
it's their, yeah, it's their small mundane world.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
prologue, if you use it right, is a
Mm-hmm.
means to set up a much bigger, much
Yep.
more fantastical environment that, really can contribute enormously to my enjoyment of the world because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, there is this wider world coming, and that is a tease for me.
Right. But see, here's the funny thing. So first of all, we actually are not in disagreement on this. We're exactly the same.
Yeah.
Where don't do the stupid stuff and do the thing that's going to impact the reader.
Mm,
But also look at the difference between us as readers. You are much more it's into the world and you love worlds and world building and all of that. Not that you don't love the characters.
mm,
I am much more into the character. Not that I don't love the world building, but
mm.
that's the priority and that's why there's so many different that's why fans are so different. So
Yeah.
you're 100% right. That world building intro for you really get your mind going and get you excited about this thing, and then you can learn the character. For me, I don't care about the world yet. I want to be that character, and then sure, I want the world too, just like you want the character too. But that's the thing. And so neither one of these are wrong. It's
Yeah.
just what type of story you want to tell and what excites you as a storyteller. So I'm always going to start
Yeah.
in that head and I'm
I
going
guess,
to grow from there.
I mean, also very much like with Martin, right? That it would have been a whole book, perhaps, before we could have seen the others, if he didn't put it in the prologue.
Well, okay. Yes, if it was written that way. But if I was writing that and I knew I needed to do the others, I would create some scenes that would allow me to let the character experience the others. Like, so
But you wouldn't be able to do it up front.
no, no,
So
no.
you wouldn't be able to leave the threat of the others lingering in
Yeah.
the reader's mind while everybody's fucking around with the politics. And what that does is it creates in
I
the
mean, I'll
reader.
disagree with that.
No, no,
I'll
so hold
disagree
on.
with that.
Hold
I
on.
could,
Just,
I,
just, just bear with me. Bear with me
all
here.
right. I
Okay.
want to push back
Okay.
though.
So bear with me. So what he does is he creates the threat of the others. The reader knows the threat of the others.
Yep.
But the characters all get involved in human politics. But the reader knows there's this big threat coming. The reader's going, no, you idiots, you've got to look there. And
Right.
it creates a tension in the reader because he set this up in the prologue
Yes.
and then
And
ignores it.
here's my pushback.
Yeah.
That first chapter, when they behead the guy after he fled the wall because of this stuff, I think we were in Brand's head
Yeah.
during that chapter.
Yeah.
So, knowing that I don't do the paragraph, I could have, first of all, the guy tell more of the story, be in Brand's head, be in, oh no, I have heard this before. I have heard this other stuff. Why isn't my father paying more attention to this? I could do it, is what I'm saying. I guarantee you I could make the reader know that there's a bigger thing coming.
But you won't get the impact of the horror that you get by being in his head in the prologue, seeing
Certainly.
those things with
Yes.
their ice blue
100%.
eyes coming out of the forest.
100%. 100%.
You know?
You are, that's dead on.
Yeah.
but I could get the reader knowing
You could get
that
the
there's a bigger
tension.
thing coming
Yeah.
and that they're ignoring it. That's what
If the
my point
reader
is.
believes the guy,
Right. Well,
right?
I'd have to make sure that Bran believed it,
Yeah,
which
but I
in
mean,
turn
Bran's a
would then,
10-year-old kid. You know what I
but
mean?
readers believe what that's why they're so great to have an unreliable narrator, because you can have the narrator believe something and the reader believes it. And then when they're proven wrong,
Yeah, but
they don't realize, I mean, that's the whole
yeah.
beauty of that. But
My
no, you're
point is
100%
that,
right. I could
yeah.
not give you the actual fear of actually facing one of them. That would be
Yeah.
out. No way to accomplish that unless I did some crap ass flashback, which neither of us do. So you're
Yeah.
right, 100%. But what I am saying is that I could use that first chapter, written in a little different, um, to make the
To
reader
create
get
the
the
same
thing.
information, but
Yeah,
I don't think it would be as strong. I think that the horror created by that opening prologue
maybe,
serves very well to ramp up the reader's tension.
maybe.
Like that is my argument.
Yeah. No, and again, we're both on the same page. We're just,
Mm,
because we look at stories different, things are more important to you than they are to me, and things are more important to me than they are to you, which is fine. That's what creates, as they say,
mm,
Allah loves wondrous variety. And so that's exactly what this
mm,
is. We have tons of different writers because we have tons of different readers, and that gives us that that wondrous variety, you know, because there's a ton
mm.
of readers out there that don't care that much about the world, that it's always about the character's journey first. And then there's plenty of fantasy people that revel in the world, and that's their big
Mm.
thing, but they still want the character. I mean,
Yeah,
Lord of
yeah.
the Rings would not be successful if it just had the world and all the
No.
characters were just two-dimensional crappy nothing.
We're not looking for a TTRPG handbook to
Right.
your world.
Right.
There still needs to be a character and story and
Right.
everything
Yeah. Yeah. And
else.
that's why I'm going next. I'm not trying to belittle you and like, oh, you
Yeah.
just don't care about characters. You don't care about story. You just want the world. You want a role playing campaign setting. That's all your whole library is just a bunch of campaign settings. Like, no, I'm not saying that at all.
I mean, I have a lot of campaign settings.
Yeah. I don't know if like that whole thing is all kickstarted campaign settings. So I mean, I like my campaign settings too. But yeah, so that was the discovery for me with us talking, because we talked about prologues for a lot, but when we started talking about that, I started going today. That's the difference.
Mm,
I want to connect with my character first and foremost. And so I want my readers to connect with my characters first and foremost. You love the world and feel that it's very important to connect them to the world as well as the character, because I want them to connect to the world too.
But so
It's
it's
just
not just the
priorities.
world, it's also the narrative tension,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? So you can use the prologue to very effectively create narrative tension.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As Martin did there. Now you
And the
can do
way
that with your chapter one. I'm not saying you can't, but it
it's
does
more of
work
a
very well.
slow burn.
Yeah.
The way I do it is definitely more of a slow burn. I
Mm,
can't do you know, the guy being attacked by the creatures right in the opening.
mm,
And then, I can't do that. So
yeah.
when you start in that character perspective, you're definitely going to do more of a slow burn. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about that. But again, there are
And
no advantages. There's only trade-offs.
yeah.
So I trade off the punch to the face James Bond opening
Mm,
for a deeper, a more immediate, I don't want to say deeper because you can get a
mm,
deeper connection with the characters, period, but a more immediate deep connection with the character, as opposed to a
yeah.
more immediate deep connection with the bigger picture and the
Yes.
faster start. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really the only
Yeah. So
difference.
that's kind of what you trade off. You trade off a little bit of narrative tension. You trade off
Yep.
some narrative tension. You trade off some world building by not having a prologue. By
Yeah.
having a prologue, you gain those things, but you do trade off the immediate connection to the character.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So there's no, like I said, this was an interesting discussion because I never thought about it like this, even though we've gone
mm,
back and forth on prologues many, many, many times. But it's like, but look at how we like stories.
yeah.
So obviously, this is why we kind of feel this way, which means we're just a representation of, all the
Yeah.
millions of fantasy fans that are out there. And there's going to be, you know, ones on both sides, and neither is wrong. Because that's the thing is, you're not turned off by jumping into a character's head, and I'm not turned off by jumping into the world,
Yeah.
or big narrative tension or something like that.
I will say that you're probably safer with a prologue than without it, because people who really hate a prologue tend to just skip it. So
Yeah.
as long as your prologue isn't mandatory, you know,
Yeah.
like people don't have to read your prologue to understand your story, it'll be fine. They'll just page past your prologue and start at chapter one.
Yeah. That's probably the other reason why I am so loath to write a prologue, because I can't stand the thought of writing something that people skip. Like, why would I
Yeah.
bother?
Well,
No, I know, but I'm just saying
there's
that's
only
me.
like
That's a
there's only like 10-20% of people who are like, I hate prologues, I just skip them.
yeah, yeah,
And like whatever.
yeah. Because even though I hate prologues, I never skip them
Yeah.
ever.
And there are people who just like, I skip them. I
Oh yeah,
skip
no,
flavor
I know.
text.
I
I
actually
skip
think it
all of
might
that.
be higher than 10%, because I know a lot of people who tell me that, and that boggles my mind. As much as I hate a prologue, I have never skipped a prologue.
I
I've never
met
even
somebody
thought
who said
about
they
it.
never read flavor text. So I said, did you read Mistborn? They're like, yes. I'm like, did you read the flavor text? They're like, no. I'm like,
You missed the story. You missed an
I,
entire story.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
Like, you go, go
yeah.
slay, whatever. Like,
Now I don't read the copyright page,
yeah.
but I read the dedication. I read
Hmm.
any forewords. I read any. I mean, I consume it.
Yeah.
And, even the stuff that's like, oh,
I
this
read the
author's,
stuff at the back. I read the
yeah,
appendices. I read the epilogues afterwards, all of that.
yeah. I don't necessarily read the like the encyclopedia stuff, but if there's a note from the author or something like that, or if there's a forward of,
Hmm.
I knew this author when he was alive and he had this impact on me, and this is what this story did to me, and I'm so honored to be the one that writes the forward
Hmm.
for this 50th anniversary of it. Like,
Hmm.
I love all that stuff, and so I will
Yeah.
I will read all of that. But I still, because of how I write stories and because of how I like my stories, I'm still gonna always be in the prologue. But no, 100%. I 100% get your point, and hopefully this helps somebody, because you can see two sides of things. So me and you aren't on the opposite sides on much, and
No.
so it's kind of cool when we
But
are.
yeah, but this one we have our
Yeah,
different likes. Yeah.
yeah. But I don't think that we're actually different. I think we just appreciate something more than the other, and so we lean toward that side. So,
Yeah,
all right,
I think that is a great note on which to end this episode. We will see you soon for another one.
bye. If you are ready to take your writing to the next level and work with a group of highly motivated, dedicated writers who are all working to not only improve their writing, but improve your writing, plus you get to work with me on a weekly basis, then I'll encourage you to check out writersroom.us. This is a website that I have created that I really wish I had 30 years ago. It's everything a writer needs to become a better writer. Not only do we do weekly critique sessions, both from other members as well as me, we have daily writing sessions, I do monthly classes, Q&As, we have activities, I do all sorts of learning exercises, such as I do a quarterly writing prompt contest, and just tons and tons and tons of things. So if you're ready to get serious about your writing and you want to actually finish that novel and have a chance of it being published, then I encourage you to head on over to the Writer's Room and join me there. And as a special promotion for listeners of Releasing Your Inner Dragon, I'll go one step more. If you would like to get 50% off for 3 months, reach out to me. There's a million ways you can do that. You can do it through starvingwriterstudio.com, drakeu.com, any of my social medias such as LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever. Reach out to me, say that you would like to check out the Writer's Room for 50% off, and I will send you a link that will allow you to do just that. So hopefully you're ready to start getting serious about writing, and I'll see you in the Writer's Room.
Thank you for tuning in. This is Marie Mullaney, your co-host on this literary adventure. Our goal is to provide you with valuable insights and discussions on writing. If you believe in our mission, please like and subscribe our podcast. Sharing our episodes with your community not only helps us grow, but also contributes to a richer, more diverse conversation about storytelling. We appreciate your support. For a deeper understanding of the topics we've discussed, head over to Just in Time Worlds on YouTube. It is a treasure trove where fantasy meets history and science. Every Tuesday, you'll find new videos that delve into the intricacies of world building, drawing from our rich real-world history. Whether you're a writer, a role player, or just a fantasy enthusiast, Just in Time Worlds offers unique insights that will enrich your perspective. Check it out and join the journey of crafting incredible worlds.